Hello boys and girls, this presentation is about the plague, also called the Black Death. The plague is one of the most famous epidemic diseases, but not the only one. Till the beginning of the 20th century, also other epidemic diseases endangered Europe. Example given, tuberculosis, syphilis, leprosy, cholera and smallpox. We talk about an epidemic when a lot of people get infected by a disease in a short amount of time. The plague, however, we consider a pandemic because the disease also infected other countries and even continents. Coming out of the east, Mongolia and China, the Black Death reached the shores of Italy, Sicily, in the spring of 1347, unleashing a rampage of death across unprecedented in recorded history. By the time the epidemic played itself out, 3 years later, anywhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of Europe's population had fallen victim. Usually thought to have started in China or Central Asia, it had reached the trade city of Kaffa by 1346, and from there, black rats carried it onto merchant ships. It then spread throughout the Mediterranean and ravaged Europe. Did you know that in 1346 the Tartars, Mongols, laid siege to Kaffa? While surrounding the city, the Tartars came down with plague. The Tartars decided to use this to their advantage. They started loading their catapults of the infected dead bodies and began flinging them over the city walls. You can see this as a first biological weapon. An outbreak of the plague in the city soon followed. This operation may have been the start of the Black Death in Europe. The Black Death is categorized into 3 specific types of plague caused by the same bacteria. The bubonic plague, an infection in the lymph nodes, the pneumonic plague, infection in the lungs, and the septicemic plague, infection in the blood. Typically for the last type are the dark purple skin patches, therefore called the Black Death. In towns and cities, people lived very close together. The filth littered the streets and gave the rats the perfect environment to breed and increase their number. Fleas living on these rats got infected by the bacteria and jumped onto people passing through the bacteria. At the end of the 14th century, the people in Europe were often weakened by a lack of good nutrition and sufficient hygiene, and therefore an easy victim of the plague. The plague travelled on trade routes and caravans. Its path of death was generally from south to north, east to west. The plague spread when people fled to other cities. A plague doctor's duties were often limited to visiting victims. They were offered very heavy financial compensation, given the risk of death. Most plague doctors were volunteers. They wore a black hat close to the head and a long black overcoat, mostly used as a shielding from infection. More specific was the mask in the shape of a bird's beak. The beak was often filled with strongly aromatic herbs and spices to overpower the bad air, which was also thought to carry the plague. Many people also turned to monasteries, where the well-educated and always helpful monks would try to care for the sick. This, in turn, also infected monks. Also, bloodletting was used as a technique to stop the plague from spreading. People understood that their blood was infected and wanted to get rid of the infected blood. Because of the huge death toll, people were looking for answers that the church could not provide. Many people could not comprehend why God was punishing them, so they turned their backs on the church. Because of a better personal hygiene, the Jews were less infected with the plague and therefore thought to be the source of the plague. They got expelled, tortured and even murdered for the supposed crime, and it is for this very reason that we can still find a big concentration of Jews in Eastern Europe. Have a nice day.